Now, the Jags are wishing they could do this on draft night and run it back. So let's introduce my co-host for today. And welcome, Sheriff. How are you, champion? How you been? We're in the Colts get up. I love it.
Howdy, partners. I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, very good, mate. And it looks like our other co-host, his main man, A-Rod, he did run it back from the piss-poor effort he put in week one. Welcome, Viper.
Yeah, hello everybody, and I'm just so happy that we didn't see another shit fest in the second game, and I was going to be following a dead team all year, so pretty happy I am.
Yeah, You'll be all right. You're following a dead team, but anyway. Well, Sheriff, let's throw it over you, mate. We've got a special guest on today. You want to do the honours? I'll throw the ball down to you, and you want to catch it and introduce him.
We do, mate. I'm super excited to have this fella on the show. I first met him in a fantasy competition that he runs, fantasy football, obviously. It's called the FF Down Under, and if you haven't come across it, traditionally some football competitions will be named after they'll have a bowl name like a Super Bowl or a Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl, and there's a famous one overseas called the Scott Fish Bowl. Well, this fellow runs the fantasy football Down Under Bowl, and it's a great competition. So we'll have a little bit of a chat to him about that and how he got into it. But he's also a sports aficionado across the board. Wow. Unfortunately, he's one of those Patriots fans that we all love to hate. He's a podcaster. He's into everything. He's a man of many talents. And he's a dual international, or at least that's what I'm going to call him because it sounds pretty fancy. He can explain himself when he's on. But welcome to the show, Lewis Glover.
Yeah, welcome.
Hey, Lewis.
Thanks, boys. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always excited to jump on podcasts, especially with people I haven't been on before. It's always a good time. So very excited to be here.
You remember this one, that's for sure.
Very good. Well, I called you a dual international, mate, but yeah, it's probably colouring it up a little bit fancy. You're a dual citizen. Tell us where you're from.
That's right. Originally, I'm from a town called Southport in the UK, which is not in the south; it's in the northwest. And yeah, dual citizen. My mum was born in Australia, so fortunate to have two passports, which makes traveling. Well, it used to make traveling a whole lot easier around these times. A little bit, still difficult, but yeah, fortunate enough to have citizenship to two great countries.
And congratulations! We hear you recently tied the knot.
That's correct. Yeah, recently tied the knot. Had a first wedding in Brisbane with all my friends and family there, and due to travel restrictions, no one else could travel. And we'd already paid for and organised a second wedding here in Hungary, which is where I am at the moment. Sort of stuck out here, waiting to get back to Australia in the future when a flight becomes available. So I had a second wedding a few weeks back.
And so is that because the lovely lady is Hungarian?
She is. Yeah, we met a few years ago when I was living and working over here. So yeah,
well done. Well, congratulations from the Run It Back crew. And mate, what's the football scene like in Hungary?
NFL is really popular. Actually,
really,
it's on free. A lot of it. There's a lot of stuff on free to air TV. Hard Knocks is on free to air TV. Unfortunately, it is all dubbed over in Hungarian, and I'm slowly learning. It's a difficult language, but you can get you'll get your free to air games. They have wraparound shows. It's really popular, and their sort of domestic league, whatever. It's their first division is probably outside of Germany one of the most competitive in Europe. So. It's quite cool. It's very popular. You walk around the place wherever you are, and you see people wearing jerseys, NFL clobber. So it really is a growing in popularity here as well. And you get quite a few, I would say, second division college dropouts or washouts, guys who've had injuries, finding their way over here, and they can, up until the age of about 35, they can play and make a very nice, comfortable living, getting paid 50, 60,000 euros a year, accommodation sorted for them, all that kind of stuff, and live very comfortably playing a standard of football that they can do in their sleep. So it's a good situation.
It's a bit like the basketball.
That's awesome.
If they get injured over there in the NBA, a lot of them find themselves in the European leagues, and the same thing, they make themselves a pretty good penny out of it too.
That's right. Basketball's huge here in the town where I'm staying right now. There's a few American players on both the men's and women's team.
Good.
You've half busted me there, mate, because that was a piss take. I did not expect that answer, but super cool to hear. And if you get stuck over there, there's a game that'll be played in London, not too far away.
Yeah, so I didn't end up getting tickets. I might be able to get them on the secondary market, but the problem is,
Market.
on the get gouged on the secondary market. The UK is still up in the air with how easy it is to travel and not have to quarantine and all that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping before then that gets ironed out and we'll be good to go, because it would be great to get over there.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to talk to you about your footballing escapades, because you're a very knowledgeable man. And so what got you into football to begin with? Well, let's not talk too much about the dirty Pats, if you don't mind. But
yeah. Come on.
How did you get into football?
Well, I don't think my story is too dissimilar from a lot of people who got into it outside of the US. It was simply playing Madden on the old Xbox 360, I think it would have been. I think Madden 05 or 6 was the first one I had. And I only got it because my dad used to have one, a really old version on like his Omega or something like that. And he was like, oh yeah, it's so much fun. You got to give this a crack. And I did. That's how I ended up becoming a Patriots fan as well. They were one of the better teams. They were called the New England Patriots. I was like, well, I've got to pick these guys, and had no idea what they were about as a franchise. I'd heard the name Tom Brady before, because it was Tom Brady, but didn't really know the significance of it. And then I remember there used to be a show on SBS once a week, which was like a highlights roundup show of American sports. And the majority of that was NFL during the season. And so I gravitated towards, like, I knew the Patriots players from playing with them on Madden. And that's sort of how I decided to support them. And yeah, that's how I got into football, Madden, more and more. Then I found out about fantasy football, got addicted to the television show The League, which is just incredible. Played in my first fantasy football league when I was traveling around America on my way down to go on exchange. And a guy in my hostel was like, "Oh, you got to play fantasy football." And I did my first draft in a backpackers in Chicago.
How good!
Jeez.
How good! Super fun. How did you go, by the way?
Oh, terrible. The guy was a complete and utter maniac. He was a bloody Green Bay Packers fan, and was telling me that Donald Driver was due for a bounce back year when the bloke was about 37 years old. So I was like, oh yeah, sure. I'll listen to this guy. He must know what he's talking about. He's a fan of the team. I think he ended up having like 30 catches that year or something. It was a disaster. He was a lunatic. Turned out he was an ex-con and allegedly reformed member of the KKK. That's a whole other story. But
geez,
he was he was a nutter who I had to get away from and end up giving fake details to just to get him to leave me alone. So.
Well, Lewis, that sounds very familiar over here. I can tell you right now, because my first fantasy game of this year was against a dirty Packers fan too. Viper, how'd you go against that one, mate? I'm pretty sure I towed you up.
Yeah. That wasn't one I enjoyed. Okay, what else are we going to talk about? I've got a good idea. Why don't we ask Lewis how he felt as a Pats fan when it was apparent Brady was on his way out the door? How did that feel?
Oh, piss off.
Look, I was living in denial right up until the point it was put on social media. I was like, they're going to work it out. It's going to be okay. And it sucked, but all good things must come to an end. You'll experience that at the end of this season as well, Viper, with Aaron walking out the door. So that's all right. We all feel pain in our pursuit of supporting a sporting franchise.
Missing. Don't worry about that. He's missing already.
That's why I asked, so I can get ready for it.
Yeah, that's it. Honestly, the sooner you accept it, the less hurt you'll get when the announcement comes. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. But what I was confident in, that he was going to go and he was going to be great in Tampa Bay. Now, he certainly exceeded my expectations, but I just thought there was no way the end of Tom Brady was going to be anything like his last season in New England. And if anyone with a bit of a discerning eye could tell, that the team around him was set up for failure.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare.
Gronk with him. He takes Gronk over there as well, and Gronk was pretty much washed up. He, injury prone, and look at him now. He's he's around the clock.
Listen, when you take a year off and to smoke a bunch of weed, it's gonna sort you out. It's gonna sort all your back pains out. And Gronk is back. Gronk looks fantastic.
He does.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
He's in for a big year.
He is.
Well, you can all go to hell, because you will never know the pain of drafting your favorite player in all of your fantasy teams, Andrew Luck, only to find out that he's retiring the next day.
I remember, I'm sure you do as well, but I remember exactly where I was because of the Twitter melt. My phone was like overheating from it was insane. And I can't imagine what the next thing will be that melts Twitter down like that from an NFL perspective. But
yes,
Andrew Luck retiring was the one in recent memory where collectively everyone lost their shit. Even Tom Brady announcing he was leaving, it was kind of anticipated and predicted, but the Andrew Luck one just came out of nowhere. Do you think there's any hint that he comes back? We saw him in his first appearance out of the wilderness in a football environment, about 6 weeks ago?
At a high school or something, coaching or giving tips. But no, I don't think he'll come back. And Jim Irsay has said as much. The Colts organization has stayed in touch with him. Obviously, they would have him back as soon as they could have him back. He ain't coming back. They wrecked him. But I was trying to explain to my my missus the other day. There's 4 things that I could tell you. No, maybe 5. I could tell you where I was when they happened. We just had 9/11, the anniversary. I know where I was when that happened. I remember Princess Di when that happened. I remember when Steve Waugh retired. I remember when Andrew Johns wrecked his neck, and I remember when Andrew Luck announced his retirement. I know exactly where I was when all those 5 things happened, and they were all devastating.
He doesn't know where he was when his kids were born, but Steve Waugh retiring.
I was there for all those 3 things. So all right, enough shenanigans. I really want to hear about the FF Down Under Bowl, mate. How did it come about? What started it? What prompted the idea? What did you do? Obviously, you were into fantasy heavily by then because you've dropped a fake number and got away from the psycho fella. But years down the track, when did the idea pop up?
Yeah, so it all started. I was spending so much time doing my own research for fantasy football. Like I joined 1, 2, 3, 4, and it must have been about 10 or 11 leagues at that point. I was spending so much time listening to Dynasty podcasts, fantasy podcasts. I was like, let's have a go. I enjoy writing, so I was like, oh, let's see what we can do here. So I just started my own WordPress, created it sounds so corny. I hate saying it. The Fantasy Football Down Under brands, for want of a better word or the name. I had reached out to a few different people who were already established and kicked a few names about with them, and that's what we went with. I wrote a blog post on my WordPress, and it was it was just about my leagues and my sort of dynasty portfolio, and I sent it to Bobby Koch, who no longer writes, but he used to write for DLF. I'll always appreciate him because he gave me some feedback when he didn't need to. He didn't know me from Adam. He gave me some feedback. I wrote a second article. He really liked it. And he's like, you actually think you could write for a website? And he put me in touch with Dynasty Football Factory, who I still write for to today. And, I was fortunate enough to land a writing gig with them. So that's where sort of the idea of Fantasy Football Down Under came from. And then I heard about Scott Fishbowl. I was like, that's really, really cool. Let's do something in Australia. Because I started to notice how much of an appetite there was for fantasy football in Australia. People were really getting into it, but people were still quite vanilla about it. People were Dynasty was just starting to take off, different league settings, all that kind of stuff. I was like, the Scott Fishbowl is a really cool concept. Let's bring it to Australia. And in the first year, I think it was only available to people in Australia and New Zealand. I think we let a couple of people across the water in, and it was 180 teams. So that's how it started off. It was nowhere near as big as the Scott Fishbowl, but I wanted to raise a little bit of money for charity because I think that's a great component that Scott's always pushed with the FF Down Under Bowl. So I was like,
definitely,
anyone, if he can do it, why not?
Of course.
So yeah, that's how it started.
And so when was the first one?
I think we're in iteration number 4. I think we're 4, 3, maybe 3rd. Maybe this is the 3rd year.
I think I've played all of them then.
Yeah, you would. It's either 3 or 4, and that's terrible. I can't remember. 180.
No.
40. No, this is number 3. This is number 3 because it went from 180 teams. Or did it? Was it 120? I don't know. It's either 3 or 4. But we're this year we're at 300 and something teams, and this year was the first. The last couple of years, it's been open to anyone who wants to join, which is great because people get to play in some leagues with people that they've never met before. It does cause some issues when it comes to the time zones with slow drafting and people moaning and crying about people taking their time on the clock and so on and so forth. So
That'll be vital.
that aside, it gets more people in, and this is the first year as well. I decided to do away with any prize money, because previously I'd put it was a mandatory buy-in. I put some money aside for a prize pool for first place, second place, highest scorer, all that kind of stuff, and then I would donate the rest to charity. This year I decided there's no mandatory entry fee. You donate what you want to, and 100% of proceeds went to a couple of charities.
Brilliant. And so talk us through it. What's it like managing that number of teams and people wanting to do stuff?
There's about a week where it's incredibly stressful, and particularly because I'm not in really either time zone, either US or or Australian time zone at the moment. It was really rough, and so there was about a week where all I was doing is fielding emails, chasing up people, getting them to make picks, fixing incorrect draft picks, So I think next year, to run it back again, I'll be enlisting some help, because I think I've reached my capacity with about 300 people doing it by myself. But it's running smoothly now. People always enjoy it, and we raised about $4,000 for charity. So in the end, it's absolutely worth it.
Good, yeah.
I'll tell you just a little interesting take on this year's one. In my league that I'm in, I drew number 2 slot, and the guy who drew number 1, the bastard never had a pick the whole time, so he kept timing out for the 10 hours. I was 20 hours between my 2 picks all the time, but the fun part is I'm playing him this weekend, and he's got 0 points because he's out. He's not there.
My God. I hate when people do that. That sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. It ruins the experience for people in the league. I hate when, and the annoying thing is it'll be draft day and I'll email people like, oh, you win? Like, oh, sorry, mate. I don't have the time to play in this league anymore. I'm like, you don't have the time to play in this league. I'm sure you're that busy. I'm sure your life is so full that you don't have time to set a lineup once a week. And I try, the league is set up so it's as minimal effort as possible. It's a deep roster, so where you don't have to be murdering, you're killing yourself to get your waiver run. Your lineups roll over week to week. You don't have to manually set them. There's no trades. It's really a hands-off league for that reason. So people can it's meant to be fun, right? It's a fun format. You can try other stuff out. Anyway, it is what it is.
That's a great setup, and I got all excited because my first team topped 200 points, and there was only a couple higher in our whole franchise. I thought,
fantastic! There we go,
to a flyer. Yeah.
Well, the good thing about this week, Viper, you got a win coming because the bloke's got no team, so mate, it's a hands up stuff.
And I'm going to win by 180 or so, I reckon.
You're going to flog him. Yeah, you're for and against going to go through the roof. Now, I've noticed on your other ones on your website in particular, you've got an affiliation there with DraftKings. Talk to me about that. How'd you hook that all up? And I'm a big UFC fan. I noticed DraftKings are all over that as well, and they're all around the place these days. How'd you score that one?
DraftKings are monstrous. I was fortunate enough. They have one full-time employee here in Australia, is my understanding. That's Clint, and I just reached out to him and started a conversation with him. We were talking about fantasy football. That's right. I reached out to him because I was actually doing a paper for university on daily fantasy sports in Australia, and I reached out to him and interviewed him, and then sort of off the back of that we got talking, and he asked, because in terms of fantasy football in Australia, I've managed to accumulate one of the larger followings, and so he asked if I wanted to be a partner with them. So that's cool. I promote DraftKings, and if enough people sign up, they send me a couple of dollars.
Oh, nice. Everyone loves a few betting dollars.
Everyone loves a few betting dollars. That's it. Helps me offset my hemorrhaging fantasy football losses.
We've all got them.
How many teams have you got running live?
27 this season.
Holy dooly.
Jeez.
Which was a surprise because I thought it was definitely going to be over 30. So that was quite a nice surprise to come in under 30. And not all of them are money leagues. There's a few charity ones in there and such. I'd probably say there's about 20, which I'm deadly sort of focused on, and the other 7 are more fun leagues.
Yeah.
So give us a few tips. Like for me, I've only just started playing fantasy NFL for the last couple of years. For a first guy starting out in a fantasy league, give him some tips. Who should you be looking at? What sort of players would you really sort of try to build your team around first up?
I'm very much a robust RB drafter. It can hurt you because running backs get injured more often, but I truly believe in season-long leagues where you're managing your roster, starting off running back, or even running back tight end, if that's Travis Kelce, or tight end running back. You want to get a good foundation with two running backs. I think this season has shown yet again that fading quarterback is an essential part of fantasy football success. The replaceability of the position, talking in single quarterback leagues, you're a fool if you're paying up for a quarterback, because we've seen Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, all of these guys put up big numbers. Meanwhile, Dak Prescott and Josh Allen have had a quieter start to the season. Now, that doesn't mean that come the end of the season, they're not going to be top 5, top 8 quarterbacks. That's fine. But the opportunity cost that you have in drafting them over a top 30 wide receiver is massively detrimental to your roster, I think. So drafting running backs early, waiting on quarterback, only picking kickers and defenses with your last 2 picks, if even drafting them at all, if your league doesn't require them to. They're probably like the three fundamental things. And then the last one is just patience. If don't pay attention to box scores early on. You want to look at players' usage and involvement, their snap count, their route participation, all of that sort of stuff, and use that to your advantage. If someone's scared about Zeke Elliott in the first couple of weeks, go and try and buy low on him. That's probably the few beginner tips I would have. I don't think he's going to be like necessarily a top 5 running back, but he's going to get enough usage. Pollard's clearly siphoning work off in the passing game, but Zeke's going to have enough games. That offense is going to be better and better, and he's going to have enough touchdown opportunities, goal line carries, where he's going to be just fine, I think.
Okay,
we better hang on to him then.
Well, I shipped him off in our home league, Hogs, if we consider that a home league. But I had different reasons for that. And so, mate, talk to us about your podcasting escapades. You've got the brand The Vault there, and you podcast about football. You podcast about some other things. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so the Vault Studio podcast sort of group or network, they've been around for a while. They were set up by James Arthur. He's down in Melbourne. And he reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do a fantasy football podcast, which was great, because I was considering doing one at the time. So it sort of worked really well. It used to be a multi-sports group, and the NFL podcast was the one that was doing all the numbers for them. So they decided to cut everything else away and just focus and become an NFL dedicated podcast network. And we've got a bunch of shows in that network now. So we have the fantasy football show that myself and Corey do. We do that once a week on Wednesdays or Thursdays. We've got the original NFL show, which JA and DJ and Richie do. And then we've got the College Football Down Under boys, who were their own standalone podcast for previous few years, Will and Aaron, and then we brought them into the network as well. So they're just doing their same old show, and they love their college football. So if you're into that, they do a couple of shows a week, and they're good value. They know their stuff. They're really into college football. So that's always a good listen. And then there's some live streams and stuff. So we do a lot of content at the Vault Studio. We love doing it. We've got a Patreon set up. It's just a lot of fun. Good bunch of blokes all who are passionate about NFL and American football, getting together to talk about it from different perspectives. And then I've also in the last couple of months started an MMA podcast called the Punch Drunk Podcast with my friend Adam, who works for Yahoo Sports down in Sydney. And we're just a couple of goofballs who don't profess to be experts in the sport. We just love it. We love watching it. So we record preview shows, review shows, history podcasts where we dive into the entire career of a specific fighter. We love it. It's a whole lot of fun, and we just goof off and talk shit with one another.
Perfect. That's exactly why we had you here. That you're a bit of an armchair champion.
Yeah, we heard a bit of a rumor. There's a new one getting your stable there, the Armchair Champions. Run it back and flick the switch podcast shows. Looking forward to it. It's going to be great working with you.
Settle down. Well, should we kick into? We've given some plugs. We've heard about your background. Should we kick into a little bit of football talk?
Let's do it.
What, mate? What game tickled you this week? What really caught your attention? And give us a couple hot takeaways.
Patriots.
There was a couple that we can dive into. Both of them were high scoring games, and the first one was the Seahawks Titans game. I thought that was a barn burner of a game, and it was great to see the Titans get back on track offensively after their woeful week one.
Yep.
They took a huge step forward. So, if I happen to be an Indianapolis Colts fan, I'd be pretty concerned going into week 3. It's not that I am.
I'm the only one who's tipped him.
I'm concerned for different reasons, but I see what you're saying.
But on the flip side, their secondary is absolutely trash. So even a hobbled Carson Wentz should be able to score some points on the Titans. They can't get any pressure. The offensive line is going to have a day. Should keep Carson Wentz upright if he can stay in the pocket. And that secondary is absolutely burnt toast. But going back to the Seahawks game, did one of the most beautiful things in football, one of the most underrated connections in football, and every year everyone underrates him in fantasy, is the Russell Wilson to Tyler Lockett connection. Watching them two on the same page is just magical. For the life of me, I don't understand why people were drafting DK Metcalf, at his ADP versus Tyler Lockett at his. I know we're only 2 games into the season, maybe a little bit early for a victory lap, but it's certainly been good days for Tyler Lockett. I think Metcalf is going to be absolutely fine. He's a great player, but that is a fun connection. That is a fun connection to watch. They're just on the same page. Tyler Lockett's ability to find himself wide open from his route running is just second to none, and Russell Wilson's rainbow to him is always pretty to watch.
Viper's a big Russell Wilson fan, and I was listening to another podcast on the Radio Underworld network this morning. It's called Clear the Cache. So give Nate a shout out for Clear the Cache. But that's a sports collectors cards show. But they were talking about buying up Russell Wilson, and statistically, it looks like he might go past Peyton Manning if he plays long enough. That is, in a lot of categories. And so, like, Russell's hallmark is he's just so efficient.
He's absurdly efficient, and he's been held back for years by the Seattle play calling. This year it started to look a little bit better, but he is, when it's all said and done, he'll be a first round lock for the Hall of Fame, first ballot lock. He truly is a sensational player. He could even if he didn't have the legs, his arm talent is phenomenal, but then he can get those out of structure plays, and what he can manufacture it's just breathtaking at times. But that's a good throwback there for Nate from that podcast. He's a big cricket guy.
Is he really?
I just remembered we've had some long DMs about, he saw it on TV, and I think it was during I can't remember, he was trying to gamble on cricket or something like that, and he messaged me, and we've had some long back and forth talking about cricket, which is just completely random, but he really got into cricket, so I thought that was quite fun.
That's amazing. Well, back to this game though.
Yes.
Ryan Tannehill, I'm surprised, like, no TDs in this game where they still get over Seattle. It was all Derrick Henry. Nothing through the air. I mean, he threw for 347.
He had one completely stolen off him, jobbed by the Zebras on the Julio Jones touchdown, which was, it happens, but I don't know how, when you review to that detail, that they could come up with a way to overturn the on-field call of a touchdown. It is what it is. So that would have been a better day for Ryan Tannehill. The thing I was most encouraged by, though, since he joined or became the starter for Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill had been one of the best, if not the best, play action passer of the football. Sure. And last year, I think he had play action on 36% of his dropbacks, and in week 1 it was like 11%, and it was like, oh, this is not good. It didn't.
Yes.
But they got back to that. They went back to the play action. They got over the 30% mark. So hopefully that's going to be something that's involved in the game plan moving forward. And also, AJ Brown had a bad game. Like he had a case of the drops. He tweeted out afterwards that one of his family members texted him and said he couldn't have caught COVID that day, which I thought was quite funny. He's a great follow on Twitter. He can be very self-deprecating. He doesn't take himself seriously, but I think better days are ahead for him. And once him and Julio Jones took a huge step forward in that offense, and once both of them are firing, I think this offense is going to look very, very good with Tractor Cito, carrying the load in the backfield as well.
Yeah. Well, and I did predict at the start of in our first podcast before week 1 that, the AFC South is really Tennessee's division to lose. Mm-hmm. So we'll watch and see. I hope I'm wrong, but for my own sake. But is there another game that caught your eye for either good or bad this week?
We could go with bad. The other good one I will mention, because I think he's appointment viewing for television, is Kyler Murray, the Cardinals and the Vikings. That was a great game. Vikings yet again having their heart ripped out by a kicker. Taxes and Vikings kickers costing them games. There are very few certainties in life, but those are 3 of them. The Cardinals offense is going to be great this year. Kyler Murray gets put in positions that no one should be able to get out of. I would say his ability to make certain throws is probably second only to Patrick Mahomes, and he makes plays that literally nobody else in the NFL can make because of how electric he is with his feet. Even Josh Allen's got a bigger arm than him, can force throws into a tighter window, but he doesn't. He's a mobile guy, but he's nowhere near as agile and as elusive as Kyler Murray is. Some of the plays he can make are just ridiculous. And the Vikings did a good.
I love it.
He does.
He just always backs himself.
And he'll take a sack and be like, okay, get up and go again. He doesn't let the previous plays affect him. It's really good to see. So that was an exciting game. Kirk Cousins again continues to be such an underrated quarterback. Vikings fans, I promise you do not want to get rid of Kirk Cousins, because your team would be significantly worse. Be happy with what you've got. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. And the game that was disappointing, that really didn't fire, that I'm sure everyone was hoping to in the way that it did, was the Chargers-Cowboys game.
Oh. Yes, yeah. And I've got big raps on the Chargers. They're great on both sides of the ball, and they haven't quite found their click just yet, but I still hold hope. And Justin Herbert was great last year. I mean, Eckler's playing injured. There's plenty to get back on track for them.
100%. Couldn't agree more. There's a lot of penalties in that game. It was ticky-tacky. It didn't really fire off the way we were hoping, the way Vegas predicted with the points. So I think better days are ahead for both of these offenses.
So
you go.
Yeah, what's your take, Lewis, on Lamar Jackson? Good or bad? How do you rank him?
You understand?
I think Lamar Jackson is fantastic. He is so unique that. Is he the best passer of the football? No. But I also think his limitations, let's call them, are massively overstated. He does what his team needs him to do. You don't win the MVP throwing 35 touchdowns if you're a bad passer of the football. And I think we've seen him improve his throwing. Is there room for more improvement? Absolutely. But the offense is set up in such a way that makes him almost impossible to defend when he's playing well. And finally, he's got a semi-decent receiving core. Marquise Brown is healthy and starting to be used in a way that's effective. Sammy Watkins is being able to stay healthy and is a competent professional NFL wide receiver. They still haven't had Rashad Bateman yet. Mark Andrews is playing so-so.
Well, Lewis, you were just talking about Lamar, and I think you're coming at it from a bit of a fantasy perspective, because watching him play football, he's very, in the NRL world, we call rocks and diamonds. A little bit like, say, a Blake Ferguson. But, he does flashy things. He can carry that whole team on his shoulders, and he can also lose you a game. And he's done it already. He's done both of those things this season. What do you think about a guy like that? He's so enigmatic, and he can turn a game on its head. Does he need to learn to rein it in a little bit? Rushing with the ball and ending up upside down, putting your neck at risk. And what Ravens fan wants to see that?
I think Ravens fans who like exciting football want to see that. I think the problem, and the NFL
Ravens
is
fans who like roller coasters want to see that.
Yeah, I mean, that win against the Chiefs speaks for itself. And
Yeah,
the reality is going deep into the playoffs and winning a Super Bowl is probably one of the hardest things to do in sports. You need so many things to go right for you. And, as I was saying before, Lamar has gone well with this team in spite of the lack of offensive weapons that he's had at his disposal. And so he is forced to do more and more by himself. As they build up this team around him, I think he will have to do less. But football is such a small sample size. I think that cutting it down to single plays at a time is probably doing it a bit of a disservice. And when you look at his body of work through his starts, I think he's been a well above average quarterback. The Ravens have been one of the better offenses. And I think that just comes with it, right? He will fumble the ball. He will fumble the ball at times. You just have to hope that doesn't come at one of the most costly phases of the game or in the playoffs. But I think when you have that level of success, it's just something that you've got to live and die by.
Yeah, take the good with the bad.
He's not that stupid either, because he actually does his own contracts. He doesn't have a manager. He does them himself.
Oh yeah, Lamar's he's a smart bloke. He knows what's up.
Yeah, exactly.
Except when he's out trying to play flag football on hard concrete just before the season starts. Or like Juju Smith used to do in the milk crate challenge. What are you blokes doing? Come on.
Doing flips after a touchdown and he lands on his neck.
Yeah. That
not a good look.
I mean, it looked cool, but come on.
Well, that's another Blake Ferguson comparison.
Exactly,
Yeah.
So Lewis, tell us just briefly, what are you looking forward to and excited about in round 3?
Oh, the game of the week is going to be the LA Rams and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yep. That's going to be a hell of a game because it's going to be the first tough defense that the Tampa Bay offense has faced. And it looks like they're going to be without Antonio Brown as well. He's been put on the COVID list. He's vaccinated, but he's tested positive for COVID. But he might, if he's able to return a negative test quickly, he might make it back. So big weeks for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin likely ahead. And if you're getting real desperate, maybe a little Scotty Miller time, something like that. Ooh. But that's a game that I'm really looking forward to. Chief Chargers could be a hell of a game. And the reason why I'm excited about that is in the off season, their new head coach Brandon Staley said that they're chasing the Chiefs and they know that to be successful in this division, they're going to need to score points. So I'm anticipating an aggressive play calling game from them. This is a game that I'll be heavily targeting in DFS, for example. And I think that the Chargers are going to be aggressive on 4th down. They're going to be going for it a lot. And I'm excited to see what they can do on an offensive basis. They're going to be able to score points against the Chiefs because the Chiefs defense absolutely stinks. They've given up touchdowns on 100% of their red zone defensive plays this year, 8 for 8. They're garbage. The Chiefs defense is trash. So the Chargers are going to be able to score points and hot trash. But Patrick Mahomes hides a multitude of sins. He is the ultimate eraser. He is the ultimate leveler. And if he's going hot, there's nothing that the Chargers defense will be able to do to slow him down. So this could be, a properly legendary shootout between these two teams.
Can't wait.
Now, Lewis, we put it out there on social media that you were coming on the podcast, and so we got a few questions that came in from the fans of the show. Now, two of the questions were the same, and I thought it was a bit uncanny and a bit ironic. Now, one was from a Zach Taylor and one was from an Urban Meyer. And it simply says, can you please help me draft a quarterback because the ones we got are dudded. Who do we draft that can score points?
I don't think the problem lies with the quarterbacks at all. I think it lies with the donkey organizations around them that aren't giving the quarterback they need. One of those would be actually hiring Urban Meyer, which was a horrible decision when you're asking a 50-odd-year-old bloke who's never coached in the NFL who thinks that motivating players by yelling hydration at them and yelling at them through a megaphone is going to encourage professional millionaires to put a bit of pep in their step. Yeah. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be absolutely fine, but the Jaguars need to get him an offensive line. They need to get him some weapons. Drafting Travis Etienne, and this is not me Monday morning quarterbacking because he got hurt. Drafting Travis Etienne was one of the biggest donkey picks you could imagine, and it was just like, confirmed exactly what I suspected Urban Meyer was going to be like. So huge cock up there from the Jags. Should have been investing in the offensive line. The Bengals, again, Jamar Chase, a wonderful talent, but their offensive line is really struggling, and Joey B is needs some time back there. I would have hoped that they would have poured some more resources into their offensive line. In terms of a coach, I don't think that Zach Taylor's necessarily all that. I know he wiped Sean McVay's ass for a quick minute there, and all of a sudden he was a hot coaching commodity.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the quarterbacks could be okay, but more and more teams need to put their quarterbacks in the position to succeed. And as a Patriots fan, it hurts me to say, but the recent gold standard example of this, and a franchise that's being run incredibly well and doing everything they can to support their quarterback, is the Buffalo Bills. And everything that they've done is just A+ material. They went out and got him Stephon Diggs. They got him Cole Beasley. They got him Emmanuel Sanders. They invested heavily into the offensive line. They've been aggressive in their play calling on early downs, and just everything that you would hope to see Josh Allen succeed. They've done that. And so I can do nothing but give them raps. The Jaguars should be looking at that model and be, okay, that's what we need to do. And hiring Urban Meyer was a huge step back in that pursuit, which is a shame for Trevor Lawrence.
Now, before you throw it back off over the Sheriff and round it up, mate, you mentioned UFC. Now, I'm a massive UFC lover myself. We've got the big UFC 266 on this weekend, and it's going to be an absolute cracker. Who wins?
Look, I think Volk can get it done.
Yep.
I think Volkanovski can get it done over Ortega, who is a completely different fighter than the one who Max Holloway demolished 3 years ago.
Yep.
But the reason why I think he can get it done is his pressure and his in-your-face style and his accumulating strikes can get Ortega going backwards, which makes it a lot more difficult for him to use that striking game that he's developed. And I think there's a vastly different level of skill set between a very good striker who can come forward and put shots together versus a striker who can go backwards and be dangerous as a counter striker. And I've yet to see that from Ortega. I don't want to assume that he's all of a sudden developed that. And I think Volkanovski can do that. And his wrestling is good enough, and his body size and his low center of mass is good enough to be able to keep the fight standing. And I think he wins this by decision. And Valentina Shevchenko just murders Lauren Murphy inside 1 round. It's not even a fight.
Well, there's no competition in the ladies, really. What really needs to happen is they need to work out a weight class for Nunes to go up against Shevchenko. That just needs to happen. They do want to fight each other, but it's just a weird, they're both different weights. But
yeah, they need to do a catch weight bout or something like that. A special bout where neither of their belts are on the line, but just for purely for them to test themselves, and then they can go back to cleaning out their respective. Oh, of course, go back to their respective divisions. They're the two greatest female fighters of all time fighting against one another. That will be an absolute electric fight if we see that rematch.
Yeah, and did you see the footage today of Nick Diaz swinging handbags in his UFC promo before the fight? Like, geez, he's looking a bit old. I think Waller gets him.
I don't know. I'm not putting a whole lot of stock in that. It kind of feels like Nick Diaz is like, oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to do this media nonsense, which we know he hates. Yeah. But he doesn't look like the trimmest, and that's concerning. Now, obviously they've asked though for him they've asked and accepted to have this fight at 185. Okay. So I'm just thinking that he doesn't want to go through a severe weight cut. He's probably got a couple more pounds to lose, and he might look a bit trimmer come weigh-in time. I'm still riding with Nick Diaz only because I think Robbie Lawler's chin is completely gone, but it wouldn't surprise me either with all of that time out of the ring to see Robbie Lawler win. And at the end of the day, I said this on the preview podcast we recorded yesterday for UFC 266 that I don't care who wins. These are both legends of the fight game. I'm just looking forward to seeing them get in there and just have a great fight. I think, I will plug that episode because we had Christopher Reeve, who's a Kiwi sports journalist for the New Zealand Herald on there. And he was great. He has a lot of access to their city kickboxing guys, has good working relationships with them. And he talked about the Dan Hooker situation, a bit of Israel Adesanya chat as well. So that was really interesting to hear that from someone who has a very close professional relationship with them.
I like Dan Hooker. So
hey, just before we wind up, Lewis, any chance that you might be interested in a couple of 3rd or 4th round picks for Melvin Gordon?
Oh, get out of it.
Which
one, you know?
in the Hogs League, I could, I might be interested in a couple of third-round picks and maybe a flyer position player, but I'd be willing to move Melvin Gordon. I'm in full teardown rebuild mode. I accepted to take over that orphan team because I trusted Lucas. I hope he's listening to this. I trusted Lucas and left me the biggest load of donkey shit I've ever seen in my life. It is a horrible roster. So I'm trying to rebuild it. So I'm taking picks.
You should have got there when I got there. I got one worse than yours. I managed to win the toilet bowl with it last year.
Nice, well done.
See, this is why they call him Viper. See him striking now. He's starting to strike. And he's got his opportunity.
Just sort of get one strike in before we go.
Shout out to the teaser. We're all throwing wild left hooks at you, mate. But Lewis, thank you so much for joining us. We loved having you on Run It Back, and mate, you're a wealth of knowledge, and we hope we can have you on again sometime. So, mate, cheers for your time.
Yeah, I had a great time, boys. I'd love to come back on the Run It Back show. This has been awesome. Anytime I get the chance to talk NFL fantasy with people that are equally as passionate, it's an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much for having me on.
Brilliant.